The previous speakers have said it all. And think about it for a moment. A young man who dedicates his life to helping disadvantaged young people in Peckham. A trade union leader brought up in poverty, determined to ensure that poverty will not blight the future of other young men and women. And an inspirational teacher, a wonderful mum, and a fantastic son, all showing that state education can work. All of them appearing on a Conservative Party platform. That tells us something very important, something the whole country needs to hear. It is now the Conservatives that are the party of social justice in Great Britain. That's our mission in education, to make sure that every child is given the opportunity to flourish. We believe in the unique, cherishable specialness of every young person. We believe that with the right education and the right values, they can achieve anything. They can astonish us with their talent and their potential. And it is our mission as a party to make sure that they can all succeed. And in that respect, I couldn't succeed, I couldn't make a difference if it weren't for the fantastic support that I receive from my ministerial team. I'm really lucky to have, as the Minister for Children and Families, Edward Timpson. In the last year, Edward has transformed the education of children with special needs in order to ensure that all young people living with a disability at last have the support they need all the way through to the age of 25. It's also the case that Edward has ensured that every child in care, every looked after child, has an additional £1,900 spent on their education, so the most vulnerable in our society get the best possible education. And on top of that, Edward has also ensured that a record number of children have been taken out of care and placed in the loving arms of adopted families. Edward is truly an inspiration in public life. And sitting alongside Edward today is another fantastic minister, Liz Truss. Liz is a dynamo. Liz has been responsible not just for extending free childcare to 3- and 4-year-olds, but also making sure that the most disadvantaged 2-year-olds have free childcare as well. She's been responsible for implementing a school food plan, which makes sure not just that all our children have healthy meals at lunchtime, but also that the children who are starting out on their life's journey, infant children, all infant children, will get free school meals. And the reason why that is so important is that they won't just get the right nutrition, they will also get the right values. Because eating together, talking together, using that knife and fork, learning how to be civilized, learning how to be courteous, learning how to be polite, sets them on a course for success later in life. It's also the case that Liz has taken our exam system by the scruff of the neck and given it the shaking that it needs. She's made sure that we've got rid of modules and resits, dumbing down and dodgy questions, and she's made sure that at last our exams can stand comparison with the most rigorous in the world. Thank you, Liz. I'm also fortunate to have a fantastic Minister for Skills in Matthew Hancock. Matt has been responsible for ensuring that we get rid of the valueless qualifications which led many young people into employment dead ends. Instead, he has introduced new hope for young people with traineeships, which combine work experience and the chance for young people to prepare for apprenticeships. And Matt has ensured that those apprenticeships are genuinely rigorous, they make sure that people are work ready, and as a result, with these changes, Matt is ensuring that the pernicious evil that is youth unemployment is at last being tackled head on. And one other member of my ministerial team in the Lords, John Nash. John is a very special person. Long before he ever went anywhere near politics, he had already transformed children's lives. He took over one of the worst schools in London, Pimlico, a bastion of NUT nonsense. And he ensured that within a few years, that school, by insisting on strict discipline, proper uniforms, and high standards, was turned around, and it's now one of the best in the country as Pimlico Academy. And what John has done for that school and for those children, he's now doing for hundreds of schools and thousands of children as the Academy and Free Schools revolution sweeps across the country. There's one other person whom I've worked with who I'd particularly like to thank. Someone who, throughout his ministerial career, always sought to do the right thing. Someone who ensured that we now have the right policies for reading for all our young people. Someone who fought to ensure that we had an aspirational curriculum fit for the 21st century. Someone whose sense of mission and commitment to social justice is an inspiration. Former Minister for Schools, great colleague and great friend of mine, Nick Gibb. Thank you, Nick. And Nick has made a difference. It is thanks to his changing the way in which schools were judged that we sent a signal to every school that the most important thing to do was to make sure that children were studying the sorts of rigorous subjects that would enable them to go to a good college or into a great job. And as a direct result of Nick's interventions, in the last 3 years since this government came to power, the number of students doing A-level biology has gone up by 14%. The number studying A-level maths has gone up by 19%. The number studying A-level physics has gone up by 22%, and the number studying A-level chemistry has gone up by 24%. More children learning more as a direct result of a heroic Conservative minister. But I do want to stress, one of the reasons why we've been able to make progress is that we've had a policy that has been supported not just by this party, but across politics. We're fortunate that Sarah Tether and David Laws have argued the case for our reforms from the ranks of the Liberal Democrats. I'm fortunate that good people in the Labour Party, like Andrew Adonis and Baroness Sally Morgan, have pushed for higher standards whenever they've had the chance. And I've been uniquely lucky that I've had the chance to meet US Democrats, like the Mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, or the Secretary for Education in Barack Obama's administration, Arne Duncan, all of whom have been cheering us on. And the reason they've done so? Because our education policy is modern, progressive, radical, and mainstream. And that is why we should celebrate the gains that we have made and the allies that we have won. But there's one group of people that I want to thank most of all, and they are the nation's teachers. We're fortunate, I'm fortunate, that we have the best generation of young teachers in our classroom today, better than ever before. And we have the best generation of head teachers. And it's important that we all remember that, because it's teachers, not politicians, who are driving reform on the ground. It is teachers who have been most vigorous in demanding that we have a tougher, knowledge-based curriculum. It is teachers who have been most vociferous in saying that we need to have the sorts of policies on tough discipline that this government has been proud to introduce. And it has been teachers who have been responsible for transforming schools so that we now have 174 free schools like Mark's and more than 3,000 academies. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please show how grateful we are to the nation's educators for the wonderful job they do? Teachers everywhere, thank you. But there are one group of people whom I can't thank today. They're the people who are standing in the way of progress. They're the people who are the enemies of promise. While we gather here today, indeed, while Mark's students are still at school, the leaders of the militant teaching unions have called a strike. And the reason that they've gone out on strike, in a new example of twisted militant logic, is that they want to stop good teachers being paid more money. They're striking against the performance-related pay that, as George Parker reminded us, has seen results rise in Washington, D.C. and liberated the potential of poor children. And when I challenged one of those union leaders on the radio the other day, he said that I shouldn't worry because his union was implementing child-friendly industrial action. Child-friendly industrial action. It's one of the great contradictions in terms of our time, like self-effacing Simon Cowell, or moving apology from Ed Balls. The truth is, there is nothing child-friendly about industrial action. Children lose a day of education. Parents have to scrabble to pay more for expensive childcare. And the prestige of the teaching profession, which we all want to see reinforced and built up, takes a knock. So I have a simple message for the leaders of the militant teaching unions. Please, 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 don't put your ideology before our children's interests. And what have Labour said about this strike? What words of condemnation have they uttered? Nothing. Nada. Zilch. Once again, faced with the exercise of trade union muscle, we've seen the Labour Party reduced to a cowering blancmange. But it's not just that the Labour Party is saying nothing about this strike. I listened with interest to Ed Miliband's speech to his conference last week. He spoke for an hour and 15 minutes, an amazing feat of memory. He managed to recall the entire 1983 Labour manifesto word perfectly. Who says that there's no place for rote learning in the 21st century? Anyway, I listened very carefully to his speech, and he uttered not a single word about our schools. The party that once said that at the heart of its beliefs was education, 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 when it came to schools policy, had nothing to say. It was a nullity, a vacuum, an absence. I passionately believe that if we're going to deliver social justice in this country, we need policies for both the head and the heart. And the policies for the head are the sort of economic policies that George Osborne has introduced, which bring new hope and new jobs to those who have been denied it in the past. But if you do believe in social justice, the policy that touches the heart is education policy. And the sad truth last week is that we saw with the Labour Party, there is just a huge gaping hole where their heart should be. And we all know that unless we get our education policy right, unless we carry on with the reforms that we have been implementing, the people who will suffer most in our society are the very poorest. And it matters to me that we keep that at the forefront of our minds throughout the program of reform that we are implementing. We all know that change has made a difference across the country in the last 3 years. But the scale of inequality in our country that we inherited was so great that it's going to take far more than 3 years to overcome the inherited disadvantage under which so many young people labor. It's still the case that 40% of young people leave school without 5 good GCSEs, including English and maths. The basics that you need if you're going to get a job, let alone go on to college. And it is also the case that only 1 in 3 of the poorest children, those eligible for free school meals, get those 5 good GCSEs. 2/3 of them without the future that we would all want for our children. Now, we've taken action in order to deal with that. We've taken action in order to address that fundamental inequality. We're spending more money than any government has on the poorest children. £2.5 billion will be spent through the pupil premium. We're making sure that the best teachers and the best heads go to the toughest areas in order to give those children hope. But the most important thing that I can do as a politician is tackle head-on the culture of low expectations which has held those children back for so long. Which is why I was so glad that Lindsay said what he said today. We all know that if you come from a wealthy home, there'll be plenty of opportunities to read and study. You'll be introduced to works of literature. Your parents will take you to the museum and to the theatre. The best that's been thought and written is there, if only you reach out your hand. But if you come from a poor home, you don't have those same opportunities. There are no theatre trips, no days spent in the Science Museum, no books read to you from a well-stocked library. The only place that you can encounter great minds is in school. And that is why it matters so much that we get it right and that we raise aspirations. But don't just take it from me. Listen to what one of my colleagues in the House of Commons said. An emphasis on rigorous education and on obtaining core academic subjects is not, as is sometimes argued, contrary to the interests of working-class children and of black and minority ethnic children. On the contrary, precisely if someone is the first in their family to stay on past school-leaving age, precisely if someone's family doesn't have social capital, and precisely if someone does not have parents who can put in a word for them in a difficult job market, they need the assurance of rigorous qualifications and, if at all possible, core academic qualifications. The person who said that was Diane Abbott, the Labour MP for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, who's got more sense about education in her little finger than the rest of the Labour frontbench put together. And when Diane said that in the House of Commons, I said that if I'd been a member of the Labour Party, I would have voted for her to be leader. One of my friends took me aside afterwards and said, Michael, don't you realise that Diane Abbott was the most left-wing candidate for the Labour leadership? Well, after last week, I think we all know that that wasn't true. I think we all know who the most left-wing candidate for the Labour leadership was, and he won. But it's because, as Diane Abbott has pointed out, schools are where opportunity is provided for those who've been born into disadvantage, that we have to press ahead with our reform programme. It's why we need David Cameron back in Downing Street with a Conservative majority. It's why we need the team that I've been working with and the team that we heard from today to have the opportunity to finish the job. Because I'm in politics for a simple reason: to give every child the great start in life that I was fortunate enough to be able to enjoy myself. Making sure that we extend opportunity to the poorest is a Conservative cause, and it is a noble cause. So let's today promise that every single one of us here will carry on fighting, struggling, speaking, canvassing, campaigning, doing everything we can to ensure that every child in every family in every part of the country at last has the chance to succeed. Thank you.